friend. You're listening to The Sustainable Body Worker, the podcast for massage therapists who want to grow thriving, purpose-led businesses without the burnout. Here we talk about nervous system aligned business strategy, pricing that makes sense, client work that doesn't deplete you, and how to build a career that actually supports your life. I'm your host, Gretchen Popp, massage therapist, mentor, educator, and recovering overachiever. Let's get into it. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Sustainable Body Worker. Today's episode is such a treat. We're talking about one of the most overlooked yet powerful parts of your business as a massage therapist, the space you work in. Because your treatment room isn't just where you do your work, it is part of your work. It's a container that holds your energy, your clients' nervous systems, and the transformations that happen every single day. My guest today is Jamie Smith, the founder of Happy House Studios. Jamie is a designer, educator, and fellow massage therapist who helps practitioners create treatment rooms that actually work, spaces that feel nourishing, grounded, and supportive for both the client and the practitioner. In this conversation, we talk about how the design of your environment can impact your nervous system regulation, your creativity, even your business growth. We also get into some practical tips you can use right away to start to transform your space, things like lighting, sound, flow, and how to make even a small treatment room feel more expansive and aligned. Jamie also recently taught an incredible masterclass for the Sustainable Body Worker community, where she went even deeper into these concepts with visual examples and actionable steps. So if you love this conversation and want to take it further, you can get instant access to her full class and dozens of other masterclasses taught by incredible people for as little as $57 inside the Sustainable Body Worker membership. Link in the show notes. And if you're ready to go all in on reimagining your workspace, Jamie's in-depth online course on treatment room design is also linked right in the show notes for you. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Jamie Smith of Happy House Studios. Alrighty, Jamie, I'm so happy to have you here. This is going to be such a good conversation, and honestly, a conversation that I've never really thought too hard about, but the information that you provided me ahead of time really got my wheels turning, and I've been thinking about it all week actually, being in the spaces that I practice in. And first and foremost, before we get into it, I would love for you to have the opportunity to introduce yourself and let the listeners know a little bit about you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk to you. And yeah, I think, just what you said, you hadn't really thought very much about it. It seems to be a little bit of a missing puzzle piece in the coaching world for body workers and wellness practitioners, spa owners. Um, I'm sure people think about it, they might just not know what to do about it, or they might sense that their space is off, but not sure why, that sort of thing. So I was a body worker for about 18 years before I took a hiatus and then went back to school for interior design. So, that just positions me to serve this niche really well. I understand these spaces really well. I've worked in a variety of spaces over the years as you know, some feel more effective and supportive than others.
Yeah. Well, it's like a combination of the space being effective for the body worker to be able to work in. I think the way
Mhm.
that I've thought about a massage space being designed, I've focused more therapist focused on
Hmm.
like how big does the room need to be, and man, I'm tripping on this stool quite a bit. Maybe I could reposition that. And I really loved in the information that you provided to me and I was able to look through. I love how your work is rooted in creating spaces that nourish the senses. So I would
Mhm.
love to hear more about what inspired you to focus specifically on healing environments for massage and wellness spaces. Is it primarily because you have that background as a body
Mhm.
worker and you just naturally fell into that, or is there something a little bit more deeply rooted in that?
Hmm. You know, a couple things. First of all, I'm like an old school hippie, right? So I feel like my connection to nature is sort of a defining piece of my life.
I love that.
And I always look to nature for support and information and, being a sacred space in and of itself. I'm not actually sure how I first began down this path, but I will say, anecdotally, that one time I was in a workshop with Till Lichow. Am I
Hmm.
pronouncing his name correctly?
As well as
Uh,
I know from
yeah.
having looked at it.
And he really just sort of like, said this one thing and I just hooked into it and like would not let it go. And this was years before I studied design, but it was essentially he said something like, the space is doing half of the work
Mm,
for you or with you or alongside you or something like that. And I was like, well, I want the citation. Where'd you get this information? What does that mean? Because I'd always been interested in design, studied architecture in high school. My dad was a builder, those sort of
okay.
things. So it was always sort of in my realm of passion and interest. So I did come across biophilic design, neuroaesthetics, and another training that I've done doesn't have a great name, if you will. It's just a training in healthy materials specification. So we're looking at how taking cues from nature, patterns, materials, and then kind of on the sustainability end, looking at the life cycle of a product from manufacturing to end of life, and if it's biodegradable or recyclable, those sort of things are all informing my practice as a designer and how it relates to our own innate senses, our healing capacity, and the connection to nature.
Well, so multifaceted. There's so many things to think about.
Yeah,
So,
that's
okay,
right.
let's first start with how you talk about design as both sacred and practical. For massage therapists listening who might be renting like a small room, for example, working within tight
Mhm.
limits, how can
Mhm.
they start balancing those two specific qualities?
This is a great question. I feel like this question sort of embodies the multifacetedness and the kind of the both and of this approach to design and creating spaces that feel really supportive for both the therapist and the client. So I think one way to say it is that the sacred piece is sort of like your why or your intention behind your practice, the kind of space you want to create, the kind of outcomes you want for yourself and your client. And then the how is like the practical. So it's the implementation strategies, the design itself, the design process that you go through, and the goals that you set for your space.
So intentional. So, what
Yeah.
would you say is like a first step? Say I'm in, because I'm thinking about early on in my practice, right? And sometimes we're working in spaces that are shared, and
Hmm.
there's not necessarily too much that we can do because maybe it's someone else's room and we're just there a couple of days a week, or we are working with bare minimum because we can't afford all of the nice
Hmm.
things,
Yeah.
or we expanded and because we have multiple treatment rooms, you can't afford to do all of the nice things because you're buying multiple of everything, right? There's so
Hmm.
many different
Hmm.
levels of expansion or levels of practice that we all come from. So working within kind of like a limited capacity, what would be the first thing that would be most impactful for a practitioner starting to think about the intentionality behind how they design their space?
I had a lot of competing first things in mind
Let's
to
hear
answer
them.
this question. I mean, I think, for practitioners who are working on a table, which I'm just gonna assume most of us are, really addressing your table setup first
Hmm.
could be one strategy. Upgrading to an electric table or a hydraulic table, I think is such a great investment. It's going to really support your body mechanics and ergonomics over time, helping you be a more sustainable body worker.
Yeah.
And then the linens and the way that you're dressing your table, the quality that you're putting into it is kind of one of the first sensory inputs that the client is going to experience. They're going to experience the room as a whole when they first walk in, but in terms of your treatment, the table is kind of the first point of contact. So I think that is a smart place to start for people. The other thing, kind of more broadly speaking, to think about is kind of doing like a sensory audit.
Mm,
So, trying to put yourself in the shoes of your client, and then maybe also thinking about it from a practical workflow standpoint, experiencing your space. What sensory inputs are you experiencing between the lighting, the sound, the scent, the textures, etc.? So kind of just taking a step back. We're usually moving too quickly, putting our rooms together, maybe not as intentionally. So taking a moment to just really experience what it feels like in your space. I know that when I had a private practice in my home, I was on a very limited budget, but I was sort of operating from a place of quality over quantity, simplicity, which can really, if we're editing out things that we don't actually need or furnishings that are out of scale, too big for the space, clutter, these kind of things can all really make an impact. And I often had the experience of clients coming into my space and just saying, I just feel calm just being in the space. So there's that real kind of immediate feedback that you can get sometimes. And clients might not tell you if they're not feeling comfortable in the space, but they're going to feel it if there's something off.
yeah, yeah, it's
Does
going
that
to
answer your
impact them.
question?
It does, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And I love that you mentioned the table coverings as like a first point of contact. I like to talk to my students about kind of the entire experience that the clients have even before they enter your space and talking
Hmm.
about the continuity of the marketing,
Hmm.
like how that translates to walking into the space because a very different branding of our marketing or our website. If our website looks different than the space that they're
Hmm.
walking into, or if the photos aren't updated, if you moved spaces, that can be jarring to the nervous system,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that it's you make such a valid point because I'm lush when it comes to the table coverings myself. I've shared in other scenarios the multiple layers of things that I have on the massage table because it's just that important. We've got
Hmm.
the memory foam, that's what it's called. Not the just the foam, like the actual legit memory foam, the
Yes.
sheepskin that goes all the way around, and my sheets barely fit it, but it's like so worth it to get that, all those layers. And it does because not only is that the first point of physical contact that the client's making, but it's the most consistent point of contact. So
Right.
I think that that is a really great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that takes some trial and error, or, it might take, if you're on a very tight budget, some savings to invest in some better materials and better equipment. But I do want to mention for folks who might not know, there is a pretty decent tax credit for ADA compliant equipment.
Yes.
So your treatment table qualifies for that tax credit. I've got a blog article on that, so that links all of those resources.
Oh, great.
So I just want people to know that, these investments are also incentivized in
Yeah.
that way. So maybe that makes it a little less intimidating for folks. But yeah, I mean, if you do nothing else, making your table the most comfortable, the most enjoyable, the most luxurious, and people do this in so many creative, budget-friendly ways.
Yeah. There,
Yeah.
it's interesting too because a uncomfortable face cradle or the
Oh.
an itchy sheet or something
Mm.
like the table warmer attachment at the foot of the table for tall clients can be just it could ruin the whole massage. You could be giving the best massage
Right.
in the world, but that slight discomfort
Hmm.
can really throw us off. And it all comes down to like they might not even be consciously aware of it too. Like it
Hmm.
could be something that just doesn't necessarily allow them to let go of their leg entirely, and their entire nervous system is holding on. And I'd love to talk more specifically about the nervous system because everyone knows that I love going deep in the nervous system. So let's dig deeper into how the
Yeah.
design choices that we make in our treatment rooms actually impacts not just the practitioner's experience of working in that room, but also the client's nervous system regulation.
Yeah. So neuroaesthetics is the practice that I bring into the design process. And it really speaks to this idea that we have evolved with the natural environment, and the built environment is really relatively new for the human species, right? So our brains have not quite caught up to some of the design choices in the built environment. And so we respond to it really instinctually, kind of from that primal brain. So walking into a space and noticing things like the lighting, the sound, the materiality, all of these things are sort of read in this subconscious way that make us want to either approach, we feel safe, we want to investigate more, we feel welcome, or retreat, right? Like something feels off here. I don't know what it is, but I'm out of here. So this is just like happens really quickly in our brains. So yeah, I mean, just sort of what you were just talking about, those sort of like fine details that you might not be thinking about or you might not think are a big deal, they can really add up. So really paying attention to the sensory inputs, the visual inputs too. I mean, one thing that in the study of neuroaesthetics, they like to talk about are fractal patterns, which are seen all throughout nature. We see them in clouds or leaves and fern fronds, those type of things, wave patterns, mountain top patterns. So these kind of repetitive patterns found in nature are really soothing for the brain. And it's a fascinating area of study, but just those sort of simple things like noticing what kind of patterns you have, scent, even airflow throughout the space. All of these things can really make an impact.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I imagine like as you start to delve deeper and deeper, we can start to kind of deconstruct like, oh, my entire room is completely, just throwing off the nervous system. I heard this thing about how hearing bird song is
Yes.
something that just naturally tells the nervous system you're safe because
Mm-hmm.
birds naturally
Mm-hmm.
all quiet down when there's a predator around. So I
Mm-hmm.
wonder
Mm-hmm.
about even just using a little bit of uh, audio, just like even just very, very quietly, in addition to whatever music we're listening to, that can just on a super subconscious level be like, you're safe here.
Absolutely. Birdsong is one of the things I like to recommend a lot. It has been researched to show that it creates a sense of safety. So that kind of touches into the soundscaping piece that we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know the research there is wonderful. So we know that birdsong does create a sense of safety, and that sounds of water, all different kinds of water sounds, are really effective at masking. So you don't necessarily need a white noise generator. You could use a water feature, or
Mm.
even just play an audio track of water sounds, and that can often be as effective as a white noise machine, for example. But working with sounds from nature, whether you're just playing those kind of sounds or layering it on top of other music, can be really effective and really beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I would pretend that I was in like a little woodland brook
Hmm.
the whole time
Hmm.
at work. Although personally, I feel like I have to pee like 20 million times a day. So it would probably, I don't know, it might be good for some bladder training or something for myself. Now, in addition to the sound, lighting seems to be a really big piece of what you teach
Hmm.
as well. So, I'm curious if there's like common lighting mistakes that you see
Hmm.
in massage rooms and what simple changes someone might be able to make the biggest impact.
Okay, so you probably noticed this from my webinar slides that I shared with you, but I like to pick on the repeat offenders of the salt lamp and the rice paper lamp.
I'm
And the
guilty.
only reason we all are, I mean, these are not incorrect or mistakes. They're just really somehow default settings that practitioners have gravitated toward. Um, I don't know if it ended up in the curriculum of every massage school across the world or what happened, but I mean, they're on the right track, right? This is warm ambient lighting. So it's creating an often, cocoon-like or cave-like environment that's really soothing. They're great. They're just overused, right?
Yeah.
So we just have um, so many other options available. I just, again, want people to kind of pause and really think about how to create their space more intentionally and uniquely. Um, the problem with the paper lamp often is that because it's a floor lamp, there might not actually be space for it.
Yeah.
So we can use other strategies like table lamps if you have a console or a piece of furniture like a case good, where you're storing supplies. That can be a nice spot for a little table lamp or wall sconces. They're
Yeah.
just they're just space saving. The other thing that I think people don't realize is that there are several different types of lighting. There's task lighting, ambient lighting, and so you want to layer them.
Okay.
You want to layer them so that you have different lighting for different types of activities within your space. And then also thinking about how lighting affects our circadian rhythm. This is something that we're hearing more about, we're learning
Yeah.
more about. And so I want to just invite people to think about that and play with it. I think coming out of a really dark room when your treatment is in the middle of the day can be a little disorienting. So even though darker, warmer lighting can feel really soothing, it can also be a little disorienting if the timing feels off. So being mindful of natural light patterns throughout the day,
Yeah.
and trying to mimic that within your space. Obviously, we don't want, bright, direct overhead task lighting in our clients' faces when they're face up, when they're supine, but we can invite in natural light and have it not feel overwhelming at the same time.
Yeah, that's been on my mind quite a bit because I work in a fairly bright room, and I know that it impacts my clients, especially when flipping them over. Fair amount of them that ask for something to cover their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Eyes. Well, meanwhile, I choose that room because if it's dark and I'm in there for 6 hours, I'm going to sleep. I'm so
You're going to
sensitive to
sleep.
light. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
trained myself to like when the sun goes down, I curl up with my book and I go to bed. And I know there are some practitioners that love the cave-like room that is in the place where I work, and that's great. And when I'm in there, I definitely am able to get in the zone and time passes very differently. And I'm curious about your thoughts too on like practitioner mindset and circadian rhythm and how we're able to show up. Do you feel like that impacts
Yeah.
us? And like kind of where do we, if we have the ability to be discerning in that regard, is it better for a practitioner like me to focus on like, well, this is my well-being and I need the
Yeah.
light in order to stay awake and present, and then find a way to, provide a eye covering for the client? Or is it more beneficial to prioritize the client's ability to get into that cocoon-like state?
I think it's going to be a balancing act,
Mm,
honestly. And I think respecting your own needs as a provider working throughout the day is incredibly important. There are ways we can, obviously during our intake with the client, find out where their energy levels are at. Are they needing something more restorative that day? We might want to dim the lights and close the blinds for their benefit, while also trying to find a balance for our own benefit. So it's a balancing act and it's not perfect, but we've got so many strategies between window treatments, lighting, tools for the client like a mask or an eye pillow. You can also, I mean, I highly recommend if you have the ability to put your lighting on a dimmer,
mm,
that can be a really nice way to transition clients in and out of their session. If they're face down, you can also turn the lights up if you need to, if you
yep.
need that stimulation,
Yeah.
just bringing the lighting back down before you turn them over, that kind of thing. So you can just be more strategic throughout your sessions and throughout the day.
Yeah, I found when the previous space that I worked at was the clinic that I got to build out, and that was such a privilege to be able to choose the where the plugs go so that I have enough plugs for all my equipment and where the lighting
Yeah,
is. And we were able to put four sconces in each room and put them on a dimmer switch. And that was really
fabulous.
lovely because, yeah, when my clients were face down, it was bright and it kept me awake. We had absolutely no windows in those rooms,
Hmm.
which was great because it did allow that control. And then I brought it way down when flipping them over. But the way
Yeah.
that my treatments work, I'm minimum 90 minutes, and the majority of the time they are face down. So it's only
Hmm.
a short amount of time that it goes full dark. And that worked really, really well. So just a little nod to anyone who's considering building out a space, definitely invest in having the dimmable sconces. I love your tip about it saving floor space because, yeah, floor lamps and even shelf space. I personally am really sensitive to clutter on horizontal spaces.
Hmm.
And
Same.
it's so easy, especially when making sure that the client has a dish and the client has tissues and there's the space for this and there's our essential oils over here that are easily accessible. It can get very cluttered very quickly. And
Yeah.
that's when it comes to adding a lamp on top of that, it's just these little things that we don't necessarily think of. And I love that I love that you called out the salt lamp because I literally have like five of them in my house. It is my ambiance. But they're so good. But it's interesting too because in Virginia I've noticed that they sweat a lot. Um,
Mm.
I don't know if it's as humid where you're at. They did not sweat in Colorado where I was before, but like all my salt lamps are melting. And now I'm
Oh
thinking
my God.
this would probably be very strange ambiance in a massage treatment room if I had to like consistently clear out this weird salty muck that my salt lamps are leaving everywhere.
That is fascinating. No, I've never seen that or heard that. That is so interesting.
It's so weird. My mother-in-law just moved in from Florida and she was like, "Oh yeah, they start to sweat because of the humidity." And I'm like, "No one warned me about this." But and it makes me think too like the um the factor around cleanliness and how easy it is to clean our spaces. I know that was something that I thought about a lot, especially when building out the clinic. At first, we had laminate floors. I was so excited to move from the carpets, the yucky,
Hmm.
like office
Hmm.
building
Hmm.
carpets that, you leave the space after a little bit of time and you notice the oil ring all the way around the massage table.
Mm.
And I knew like laminate flooring is going to be so easy to clean. If my clients drool on the floor, then I'm going to be able to wipe it up and it'll be sanitary. And we eventually did tile because we had to replace it a couple of times due to neighbor flooding. Another story for
Mm.
another
Oh,
time.
wow, fun.
It was crazy, but I personally recommend tile flooring.
Hmm.
Part of the reason why we chose that after the fact is because um, my husband at the time was working at a five-star, it was a Forbes five-star rated spa, and every once in a while they came in and did their assessment, and there was a
Hmm.
specific requirement of what the floors were made out of in order to
Mm.
be considered five-star, and one of them
Mm.
was tile floors.
Hmm.
So we
Hmm.
were like, well, not that we're going to apply for this five-star Forbes rating, but we wanted to kind of keep up with that standard. And I'm
Hmm.
curious if there's anything that you found when it comes to enhancing the space's ease of cleanliness, because psychologically, I know me, like I'm looking at that face cradle, what's underneath the face cradle. I'm looking at the things, I'm looking at the surfaces, like when was the last time this was dusted? So I'm curious if anything comes to mind there for you.
Mm. Well, we certainly need our spaces to be performance friendly, commercial grade, contract grade. So those are the things that I look at as a designer when I'm specifying, we're not just looking for something you can buy at Target necessarily. Um, which, you're not buying hard surfaces at Target, but, for other furnishings and decor and things like that. So, um, gosh, this really gets into so many different things. One thing I was looking at this morning is, the information around air quality, and how our materials can impact health, right?
Mm,
So, a lot of materials have what we call chemicals of concern. Now, I am super not into fear mongering around toxicity and things like that, but there are a lot of chemicals of concern in our environment. And when we bring those into our spaces, we can experience, reactions. Some materials can be carcinogenic or endocrine disrupting or just allergenic. Um, so something like vinyl flooring is not something I specify because of the health impacts and
Mm.
because of the environmental impacts. So when you're referring to something like a 4 or 5 star hotel, they're they're specifying tried and true, timeless materials, ceramic and porcelain and stone. And then in terms of cleanability, and soundscaping, right? Like when we start to layer materials, when we have a hard surface floor, for example, that's a lot easier to clean, but we want to soften the space with soft, comfortable materials that also provide some layer of sound dampening. Adding a rug that's either something like natural wool or a washable rug is a great way to layer in those textile elements that also provide some sound dampening that are also easy to clean. So again, this I'm sorry to make it so like complex, but yeah, uh, hard surfaces are much easier to clean, and that goes for any of your surfaces, your walls, your countertops, your flooring, but also your furnishings. Um, but we don't want all hard surfaces because that's going to be echoey and feel really sterile. So we do need to layer in some of those soft finished goods as well.
Yeah, yeah. And please don't apologize for getting complex. Like this is so interesting. And I think that it gives permission for those who are listening to just play with whatever is piquing their interest right
Hmm.
now. Like I know
Yeah.
I'm personally more like audio inclined as a
Hmm.
person, and so the audio and the sound is something
Mm.
that is much more I'm more sensitive to. So if
Yeah.
there's a leak in sound from one practitioner to another. My husband and I, in my first or one of my first spaces, I worked between two other massage therapists and they were lovely, but one of them was a lot more, I guess, clinical than us, and so there was a lot more talking, and she was just
Hmm.
generally a little bit louder
Hmm.
as a
Hmm.
person, and that's totally fine. It suited her practice, but because we had drop ceilings, the
Hmm.
sound we noticed came up and over the wall, and we
Mm.
created my husband is adorable. He loves cardboard, so give him any excuse to play with cardboard, and he was all over it. But he created this thing, and this is also, I think, permission to anyone who's like, I do not have the money for these soundproof ceiling tiles. They can be really expensive.
Hmm.
But what we did is we collected egg cartons for several months, and the shape of the egg carton is really, really good at dampening sound because I
Hmm.
guess it like bounces around, but the material of it as well is really good for dampening. And we put a egg carton in between two pieces of cardboard, and he had this long piece of just, I don't know, it was probably 7 feet by 4 feet, and we placed that on top of the drop ceiling tiles on the area where
Wow.
the wall bordered, and it dampened the
Wow.
sound so incredibly well. It's probably still in the ceiling, to be completely honest. This is probably 12 years ago that we put it up there, and it worked so super well. And that probably, I mean, we just had to be a little bit patient or ask some friends to donate their empty egg cartons, and it worked so incredibly well.
That is so brilliant.
Yeah.
I love that.
Hey, friend, pausing the episode real quick to share something I personally use and deeply believe in. If you're like most body workers I know, you've probably had those days where your nervous system is completely fried from back to back sessions, admin chaos, and way too much time hunched over a screen. Maybe you want to meditate, but your mind is racing. You want to ground, but your body won't let you. And that's where the In Harmony Practitioner mat comes in. This isn't just a relaxation mat, it is vibroacoustic therapy, which uses low frequency sound vibrations through the body to stimulate the vagus nerve, activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and reduce pain and inflammation. It's the real deal. I got mine back in 2021 for my clinic, originally for clients to use before body work or a sauna session, but honestly, I used it just as much for myself. It became my go to regulation tool between client days and computer heavy work. Especially when I was struggling with back pain, insomnia, and fibromyalgia. This gave me a reset that was both physical and mental. And it's not just anecdotal either. Research shows that vibroacoustic therapy can do really amazing things. It improves heart rate variability, which is a key marker of nervous system resilience. It reduces cortisol and supports deep theta brainwave states, meaning calmer minds and better healing outcomes overall. And it helps with chronic pain, anxiety, PTSD, and even creative flow by resyncing your body's internal rhythms with soothing full body frequencies. It's also a powerful tool for your clients. I used to offer it before sessions to help clients drop into a regulated state, especially those who arrived overwhelmed, anxious, or overstimulated. You know, the ones who can't relax on the table until 30 minutes in. This helped them release their baggage at the door so that we could actually do deeper, more effective work from the start of their actual session with me. Some practitioners even use it during sessions to enhance results. I personally prefer to keep it separate, but I did love pairing it with herbal wraps, giving clients a way to receive deeply without being touched, which can be incredibly healing for trauma informed care. And here's the thing, the nervous system is the entry point for transformation. If we can calm it, everything changes for you, for your clients, for your business. And if you want to experience it for yourself or add it to your practice, head to iaminharmony.com and use my code NEURO5 for 5% off. It's a write off for your business, and honestly, it's one of the best investments I've ever made. All right, let's get back to the episode.
That's amazing. And what you're speaking to is kind of the structural level of sound masking, absorption, or deadening. Soundproofing is another really complex topic in and of itself, but there's a lot you can do within the wall assembly itself. And then kind of those DIY approaches, that is so brilliant that you guys came up with that. Acoustic tiles can help a lot. Layering soft goods and finishes can help a lot. And those are kind of the more accessible things. Even just blocking with like a big bookshelf on a wall that divides two treatment rooms. If you've got a chatty neighbor, that can be really helpful. You have to identify obviously where the sound problem is coming from and then address solutions that are specific to that. Um, even just a nice heavy tapestry on the wall can work, so there are a lot of scrappy things that people can do. But if you are doing kind of a brand new tenant improvement or build out, addressing these things in your design plan from the get-go is really helpful. Before I forget, since you're into the soundscaping piece,
Yeah.
and this is just, one of those, it's just a little tip. So when you are placing your speakers, like if you're just using one kind of USB style speaker, get it centralized so that it's going to act more like a surround sound. So whether that's under the table or at the head of the table in the center is so much more effective than having it on one side or the other. For those of us that are sound sensitive, that can be really distracting, having the sound just coming from one point in the room.
Yeah.
So thinking about ways to create balanced sound within the room is really helpful.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. And it's so worth it to invest in a speaker that sounds good too. Like
Hmm.
even just $50 more from speaker to
Hmm.
speaker in the same company, like really does go a long way. And this is just
For
my
sure.
or audio engineering nerd coming back. Like the sound is so much better and it really does, especially when we listen to such ambient music sometimes that when it gets really super quiet, you want it to come through really crisp.
Hmm.
I've got a really nice JBL speaker and I do put it at the head of the table, just in between the two front legs, so that it's just there for the
Nice.
client. And it
Yep.
works really nicely.
Yeah, it does. And that also can act as another layer of masking if needed.
Yeah. Yeah. We put the noise machines underneath the table as well. I actually remember we had these special little boxes with like all of the electronic because we had the hydraulic table and we've got the table warmer and the sound machine and all of that good stuff hiding under there. And it really makes sense again if you have the privilege of building out, then making sure that there's a plug underneath the table too, so you don't have to worry
Yes.
about the cable going around. That can
Yes,
create
the
some.
cord management of it all.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but like I am just like annoyed by my environment enough that a cable going up a wall that's not nicely secured will drive me bonkers. So having
Yeah.
it even just like going from the table to the wall, I'm I'm a little bit nervous of tripping over it. So that like psychologically, even
Yeah.
if it's just a degree of not being able to relax while
Mhm.
working on my clients, it impacts me in that way.
100%. Yeah. Just using a cord cover or, a rug can be really effective, but you definitely need a cord cover on the floor. You
Yeah.
don't want trip hazards. Cord covers on the wall if you're using plug-in sconces. Just tidy it up just enough that even if it's visible, it's not going to feel messy or sloppy. These things are going to read in a way to a client that we don't care,
Yes.
that we don't have attention to detail, that we're not paying attention. So it really does matter. I mean, I think, it sounds like we're both sensitive to those kind of things. And, if you are highly sensitive, you're going to notice these things.
Yeah, well, I mean, too, like it speaks to that subconscious when you say that the client is going to think that you're not paying attention to detail, even if they're not consciously thinking those things, the subconscious mind is making assumptions all the time about every little detail in
Hmm.
our environment.
Correct. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if we're not paying attention to detail on our walls or on the floor, with our cleanliness and things like that, the subconscious mind of the client is going to be like, well, they're not paying attention to the things that I
Hmm.
specifically asked for. And it's just that
Yeah. I
safety.
think I think that also speaks to kind of the general issue practitioners run into, like where they might be a really excellent practitioner and doing excellent hands-on work, but they might not have systems in place for their business, or their room might be, you know, not elevated to the level of their other professional standards. And so the value is just going to read less. Um, so, I'm sure in working with your clients when they invest in business systems and advanced trainings in different categories, you mentioned branding and marketing earlier. It's like we want all of these things to communicate and connect and relate and be speaking the same language and be telling the same story.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It makes the entire experience from booking till rebooking a cohesive, safe experience. And you mentioned like the investment. There's practitioners that'll invest hundreds, if not thousands, on these CEs and these advanced modalities, and yet, hesitate to invest in that hydraulic table for themselves. But even it's funny too, because thinking about the client's um, experience of the hydraulic table, that will subconsciously also be like, oh, this is a really nice table. This is a very professional massage therapist, and it'll kind of set that bar without you having to do anything
Yeah.
extra yourself.
Yeah, and this is if I ever become a researcher, maybe I'll dive into this sort of thing, but I just wonder how much practitioners realize how much their space impacts the overall experience, because somebody might know that they just got a really excellent treatment, but if that booking process or some other piece of the puzzle, the space itself doesn't land and feel supportive and restorative or in alignment with, kind of the type of treatment they're
Hmm.
going for. Again, it's kind of on that subconscious level. They might not return
Yeah.
because it doesn't feel supportive.
And they might not even be able to consciously articulate why.
Exactly. exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So interesting. I would love to touch a little bit more on the materials and sustainability that you mentioned. So, how do the materials that we use, whether it's the fabrics or the furniture, contribute to the health of both the clients and practitioners? This is such a hot topic for massage therapists, I think, because we're not
Hmm.
only in contact with the lotions that we use or the
Hmm.
oils that we use, but also what's seeping out of our client's skin or what the products that the client put on their own skin that morning. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that takes up a lot of our brain space in terms of
Mm.
for those of us who are thinking about the products and the sustainability. But let's
Yeah.
talk about the furniture and the fabrics a little bit more. What's that impact?
Yeah. I mean, the reality is that we're spending like 90% of our time indoors these days as humans. And, when you work all day long in a treatment room, unless you're making a concerted effort to spend time outdoors and open the windows and that sort of thing, it's a lot of time indoors. So we can't control necessarily the building materials, again, unless you're doing your own build out and that sort of thing. But everything from your wall finish, whether it's paint or a mineral paint,
Hmm.
um, what type of wallpaper, any of your furnishings, your floor coverings, your linens, um, there are just sort of these different levels of quality in the marketplace. So, um, it's a little tricky with mineral paint, because it's not super friendly to oily hands on the wall.
Yeah.
But I do love it. And if somebody's willing to specify it, I am all for it. But you want to look for things like low VOC paint or zero VOC paint, renewable materials like FSC certified wood, cork, mycelium, stone, ceramic, porcelain. You can also look for vintage and secondhand goods, reclaimed materials, and then there's a whole host of certifications that you can keep an eye out for. The Cradle to Cradle is a good one. Green Guard, GOTS, which is for organic textiles, fair trade. Um, Sometimes a B Corp certification on a manufacturer will be a nice indicator. Certifications don't always mean what you think they mean.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a caution there. But again, kind of what I was touching on earlier is the more that we can be mindful about what we're specifying and putting into our spaces, we're going to reduce indoor air pollution and potential endocrine disruption, carcinogenic exposure. And then if we just kind of step back and look at the big picture in terms of environmental and social responsibility, it's like, what are these products doing in the environment long term? Microplastics are a big deal right now because we have no idea what to do with all this plastic we've produced. Um, so I personally really advise folks to use cotton rather than microfiber, for example. I've written about this on my blog, so it's a good place to get more information. But um, yeah, there's a website I'll mention called Six Classes. Let me pull it
Hmm.
up real quick. It's called sixclasses.org and it's from the Green Science Policy Institute. And so it actually breaks down these quote unquote chemicals of concern so that people can start to identify a few things that they might want to avoid. Again, a lot of this is not in our control, and we don't need to be purists about it. There's no
Yeah.
possible way to, but if you're buying materials, buying equipment, it's an opportunity to, try to make a healthier choice.
Yeah. Do you know if like the air filters
Hmm.
will filter out the endocrine disruptors and all of that stuff, or is it kind of a little bit and not, or do you know? Because I know that a lot of us started investing in those air filters ever since COVID.
Yeah, sure. And, they're great for pathogenic material and particulate matter. Um, with something like off-gassing, I think it can be helpful. I don't know the answer to that question. It makes me think of one of my colleagues who was a naturopathic physician, and now she helps people specify those kind of things like air purifiers. So
Hmm.
I'll look on her website. I'll get back to you on that,
Yeah,
or I'll chat
yeah,
with her about that because um, I have heard recently that HEPA filters can sometimes not be sufficient for certain things, but I haven't started researching that yet. I
yeah,
would still say having an air purifier in your space or connected to your HVAC system would be really, really helpful. I
yeah,
would highly recommend it. And then within that, again, just like any material, there's kind of a wide range of um, options. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm
It
sorry I don't
can't
have a great
hurt.
answer for you there. I need to do more research on that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me because I know we do so much thought on just even thinking about linens. And the
Hmm.
that's one thing that we are not only, shaking out in order to unfold and make the table every day, multiple times a day, but
Hmm.
we're touching it and our client is touching it. And there's this dance that we do, I think, we want to be, investing in sustainable materials. It's best practice to be replacing our sheets once a year, and that's a lot of sheets to be purchasing, and
It's a
that's a lot
lot of
of
sheets.
textiles to put back into the system. And
Hmm.
with microfiber, it's super easy to wash oils out of, and they hold up pretty well. But then we deal with the microplastics and all of that. So, man, it's such a dance with,
It
what should I
is.
invest in?
And people have really strong preferences. So I get it. You kind of need to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But big picture, I'm certainly not never going to use a synthetic material, but for sheets and linens in particular, I definitely prefer um, cotton and other natural materials. Something I wrote about recently is something that I think a lot of practitioners don't realize is that they can work with different companies out there that produce linens and sheets that might not be specific to the spa industry, but rather the hospitality industry. So you can get really high quality, high performance sheets and linens through kind of the hospitality wing of a manufacturer.
That's really good to know because I think a lot of
Yeah.
us just kind of resort to going and seeing what's at Walmart or Target and just,
Yeah, or any of the big online massage warehouse type suppliers,
yeah.
which is fine. But for different options.
Yeah, especially once you get to that high volume, if
Hmm.
you have multiple practitioners. And it makes me
For
think too,
sure.
it reminds me of when I had Cynthia Fulmer come and talk about grounding and grounding mats, and how if you were to put a grounding mat on your massage table, then it's really necessary to make sure that the sheets are cotton so that the grounding, like that connection, it needs to be an
Hmm.
organic material. And of course, then my brain is going to, well, what am I wearing? Am I wearing synthetic? Is the energy from me able to flow through my client? And I'm like going way down that rabbit hole there.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
I think it impacts the level of presence that we're able to
Hmm.
hold if we're really making sure that those material, like, not just because, I mean, I know that too, psychologically, you see the natural patterns, you see the natural materials, you touch the natural materials, it has that quality about it. But even just energetically as well, it allows that continuation of the energy of, whether it's Mother Earth you're tapping into, or your
Hmm.
own meridian systems that are able to work through with the client. I bet it has such a huge impact.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, I think for those who work with energy work in their practice, or they're also sensitive to that level of energy. Yeah, we have a lot more resonance with a natural material, right?
Yeah. Oh, so many rabbit holes, just like you mentioned. And I love it too because, we can get really nitpicky, or we can focus on, okay, which focus area means the most to me as a practitioner. And I think to when it's something like for me, for example, mentioning that the sound is something that I'm naturally inclined toward. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if I were to ignore all the noise that like, okay, but there's all these other categories and that kind of stresses me out, put that on, hold for a second and just focus on one category that feels really good for me and is impactful for me, I can kind of have confidence that because it's impactful for me, it's going to allow my presence to increase in
Mm-hmm.
my client. It's going to
Totally.
vicariously impact them in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think that's a great way to approach this is like, what are you noticing most as a practitioner? And if you can find a solution that helps you feel more grounded and stable and centered and present throughout your work, that is going to make such a big difference.
Yeah. So you work with clients one-on-one as well as through your online course. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, what are some of the biggest transformations you've seen after a massage therapist implements your design framework?
I've had a couple really, really sweet testimonials lately that have just been so lovely to hear. Because my course is relatively new. I taught it for a few years in person at Oregon School of Massage, but I just put it online this spring, the spring of this year. So, having a few people take my course now and come back to me and say, I put my room together completely differently than I would have otherwise. And, hopping on a Zoom with them to see the results. And I had one practitioner, a Reiki practitioner, actually do a whole presentation for her networking group. She has a networking group of fellow healers and practitioners. And it was just so sweet to see how impactful it was for her. She really incorporated, um, I'm trying to remember what she was going to do with her walls. Um, I think she had wanted to do a wallpaper, but her building wouldn't let her.
Hmm.
So you're always, going to have to, unfortunately, make some compromises if you have constraints with what your building will allow. But she ended up doing some really clever peel and stick paper on top of some acoustic paneling, or
Nice.
they might have even just been like canvas paint frames, like,
Yeah,
for painting. But she basically found a pattern. It was a lotus flower pattern that she uses in her branding
nice.
and had a custom piece of artwork made that was really beautiful, really subtle, kind of had these embedded symbols that it's kind of a long story I won't get into, but just really subtle imagery connected to her branding. She framed her window with really beautiful window treatments that kind of framed the view to the outside in a really beautiful way. She has a beautiful view of the trees outside, so she wanted to be really intentional about that. Yeah, it's been really fun to see some of the results people have had. And I always appreciate when people share those with me.
Yeah, yeah. Do you ever experience working with people who are resistant to the aspect of design or like it's just not in their wheelhouse, for example? I know that when it comes to like marketing and teaching people marketing, a lot of massage therapists are like, I'm not a social media person. Like I like
Hmm.
marketing isn't my
Hmm.
thing. Like why do I have to do this? Do you ever encounter people who are like, I really have no design sense whatsoever?
Yeah, I have come across that actually just recently. But because of that, they're like, I never thought of this, or I knew, that I needed to put something in my room, but I wasn't sure what. So I think for those people, whether they work with me as a designer and they're hiring me to design their spaces for them, or they take my course, it gives you such a great foundation for, again, just kind of being more intentional and then having some processes and tools for how to implement your intention. So I have, but that's why I created the course.
Yeah, that's what the course is for. I love
Yeah,
that.
that's what it's for.
So I am curious, what does a healing space that works mean to you personally, not just aesthetically, but energetically and functionally?
Yeah, this is a great question. I mean, it's working on so many different levels, right? I mean, I think the answer is kind of about doing no harm, right? Like we want a space that is supportive and restorative. And if what Tilda Chow said is true, the room is doing 50% of the work without you even thinking about it. We want to think about it, right? We want to employ things again like biophilic design, neuroaesthetics, and healthier materials to create a space that is really working with you and for you and not against you in your space.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Nice and succinct. And I really want to encourage anyone who is like, wow, I never thought about this, or like, this means a lot to me, but I don't know where to start. Where would you direct people to learn more about your course and to follow you for more information?
Yeah, so the course is up on my website, which is happyhousestudios.com, and house is Haus. Um, so there's really a lot on my site now between my blog or the course overview. And I'm also making sure that it used to be kind of my newsletter freebie sign up document on treatment room design. It's a little DIY guide. I transitioned not too long ago over to Substack for my newsletter, and it never got put up anywhere. So I'm making sure that's on my website as of today. So
Yay.
that's just a PDF download people can receive whether or not you sign up for my newsletter. It's just going to be there for folks. But there's actually quite a lot on my blog at this point. And then the course I think is really I think it's really fun. I think people get, introduced to these concepts in a really accessible way. They begin to understand the design process. And then I include um, a design critique section where we look at a lot of different treatment rooms. And then at the end, we do a guided meditation and, a little bit of a visioning exercise so that people can create their own mood boards, which I think is just a great place to start. It's really fun and creative, and then people have this visual representation to kind of guide them in their choices moving forward to create kind of the design palette in a really cohesive way. So it's really fun. Yep, all that's on my website.
Awesome. I love that you kind of close up that experience with the guided meditation and the ability to create the mood board because I mean, everyone who follows me knows that I love a good visualization experience because it really does allow you to embody what you just learned or step into a place
Hmm.
where you can receive what is most suited for you to receive at that point in time. So I love that you create that experience as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think, especially for body workers and healing practitioners, we need that experiential way of learning. We're kinesthetic learners, so this gives us a way to kind of, like you said, embody the information and make it personal to us.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I'm so excited to see what impact your online course has. I know that this is information that I would love to see every massage school be able to share
Mm.
because I remember business class and it was like design a business card and figure out your menu and your pricing and maybe write a business plan. But, I don't know if that was necessarily useful, but this information absolutely is useful and impactful and can really shift the trajectory of people's rebooking process and feeling good in their space. And so I really want to just from the bottom of my heart, thank you for showing up today and sharing this information, putting it online, making it accessible, and doing what you do.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great introducing this to the community. I still sort of identify as a body worker, even though I'm not anymore. Still feel really connected to this community, and I want us all to be successful. I want your practice to be successful and become a researcher. I want to know what the rebooking rates look like for, a space that's just been put together on the fly versus a really intentionally created space. So thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful to get to know you and to chat with you and explore these concepts and practices.
Yeah,
Thank
likewise.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to The Sustainable Body Worker. If something resonated for you today, grab your free breakthrough session, which includes a custom hypnotherapy track to help you unlock the next level. Grab it now with the link in the show notes. And to hear more, hit subscribe. We'll see you next time.